Imagine a situation where a decision must be made in a matter of seconds, where every possible choice carries a serious consequence. This is the kind of dilemma that forces us to examine not only what we would do, but why we believe a particular action is right or wrong. Picture yourself in control of a runaway trolley, moving rapidly along a track. Ahead of you, 5 workers are unaware of the danger approaching them. You try to stop the trolley, but the brakes fail completely. You realize that if nothing changes, the trolley will continue forward and those 5 people will lose their lives. Then you notice another option. A separate track runs alongside the main one, and on that track stands a single worker. Your controls still function, meaning you have the ability to redirect the trolley onto that path. By making that choice, 1 person would die, but the 5 people on the original track would survive. Now the question becomes deeply personal. What would you do? Would you turn the trolley and intentionally redirect danger toward 1 person in order to save 5 others? Or would you refuse to interfere and allow the trolley to continue forward? This simple thought experiment reveals a much larger question about human judgment, responsibility, and the principles we use when deciding between competing outcomes. Many people instinctively choose to redirect the trolley because they believe the numbers matter. They argue that losing 1 life is a smaller tragedy than losing 5 lives. From this perspective, the morally preferable choice is the one that creates the least amount of harm and protects the greatest number of people possible. But even this seemingly simple decision raises deeper questions. Are we always justified in causing harm to 1 person if it creates a better overall result? Does saving a larger group automatically make an action morally correct? Or are there certain actions that remain wrong, regardless of the consequences? These questions reveal a conflict between 2 different ways of thinking about morality. One approach focuses on the outcome and asks which decision produces the greatest benefit. Another approach focuses on the nature of the action itself and asks whether certain choices violate important moral boundaries. The purpose of exploring these dilemmas is not just to find a quick answer. It is to understand the reasoning behind our choices and discover the values that shape our understanding of right and wrong. When we examine this dilemma more closely, the most important part is not simply the choice itself, but the reason behind the choice. Why do so many people believe that redirecting the trolley is the correct decision? The answer usually comes from a belief that preventing the greatest amount of suffering should be our priority. If 1 person must die to prevent 5 people,
Jeremy Bentham's philosophy of utilitarianism begins with a simple idea, but that idea creates some of the most difficult moral questions we can imagine. Bentham believed that human beings are naturally influenced by 2 powerful forces, pleasure and pain. Everything we do, he argued, is connected in some way to our desire to experience happiness and avoid suffering. Because pleasure and pain guide human behavior, Bentham believed they should also guide our understanding of morality. When deciding what is right or wrong, we should not focus only on personal interests or individual preferences. Instead, we should consider the overall effect of our choices on everyone affected by them. According to utilitarian thinking, the morally correct decision is the one that creates the greatest amount of happiness and the least amount of suffering for the greatest number of people. This principle is often summarized as the greatest good for the greatest number. At first, this idea seems very reasonable. Most people naturally want to reduce suffering and create better outcomes for others. If a decision can prevent a greater tragedy and help more people, it may seem logical to choose that path. This way of thinking is especially appealing in situations where leaders, doctors, or communities must make difficult choices that affect many lives. However, applying this principle becomes complicated when we consider individual rights and personal sacrifice. If the happiness of the majority is the only thing that matters, does that mean a small group of people can always be sacrificed for the benefit of everyone else? Could society justify harming innocent people if the final result appears positive?
These questions became central to a famous legal and moral case known as Queen versus Dudley and Stevens. Unlike the imaginary trolley examples, this was not a thought experiment. It was a real event that took place in the 19th century and forced people to confront the limits of necessity, survival, and moral responsibility. The story began with a ship called the Mignonette, which was traveling across the South Atlantic Ocean. During the journey, the ship encountered disaster and sank far from land. 4 crew members survived the wreck and escaped into a small lifeboat. They included the captain, the first mate, a sailor, and a young cabin boy named Richard Parker. Their situation quickly became desperate. They had almost no supplies, no fresh water, and no realistic way to know when rescue would arrive. For several days, they survived on very limited food. Eventually, their supplies ran out completely, leaving them trapped in the middle of the ocean with no obvious way to survive. As the days passed, hunger and exhaustion began to take control.